My heart was a frantic, trapped bird against my ribs, its wings beating a desperate rhythm that echoed in the hollow silence of the church. The scent of her, jasmine and rain, clung to the air around me, a ghostly presence in this place of lemon polish and old hymnals. I was on my knees, not in prayer, but in practice, repairing a splintered leg on the very last pew, the one tucked away in the shadows where the teenagers sometimes hid during sermons. My tools were scattered around me on a drop cloth, familiar metallic companions in the overwhelming stillness. Then the air changed. It was a subtle shift, a temperature drop, a current that made the fine hairs on my arms stand alert. I didn't need to turn to know she was there. Leah, Pastor Michael's daughter. She stood in a shaft of multicolored light cast by the stained glass window of the Good Shepherd, her figure outlined in hues of ruby and sapphire. In her hands, she held a Bible, its black leather cover worn soft at the edges. Her face was a mask of serene composure, the one she wore for Sunday services and Wednesday night potlucks. But her eyes, those storm-gray eyes, held a tempest that threatened to shatter the stained glass calm of the sanctuary. She moved toward me without a sound, her footsteps swallowed by the thick crimson carpet. My breath hitched, my fingers tightening around the sanding block in my hand. I was frozen, a creature caught in holy headlights. She stopped so close I could see the delicate pulse at the base of her throat, the faint, almost invisible dusting of freckles across the bridge of her nose that her foundation never quite concealed. Her gaze locked with mine, and in it I saw a challenge, a question, and a profound, aching vulnerability. Slowly, deliberately, she extended the Bible towards me. It was an offering, a benediction, a transgression. My work-roughened hands, stained with varnish and dirt, rose almost of their own volition to accept it. The moment my skin brushed against hers, a jolt of pure, undiluted lightning shot up my arm, settling deep in my chest. Her fingers lingered for a heartbeat, a silent communion, before she withdrew. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She simply turned and melted back into the shadows from which she'd come, leaving me alone, trembling, the weight of the book an alien presence in my grasp. The Bible felt wrong. Too light. The balance was off. My thumb, acting on an instinct I didn't understand, traced the gilded edge of the cover and found a nearly invisible seam. With a soft, definitive click that roared in the silence, the cover sprang open. It was hollow, a secret box disguised as scripture. Nestled inside, against the carved-out pages of Leviticus and Romans, lay two objects that stole the air from my lungs, a single, perfect wild daisy, its white petals stark against the dark fake leather, and a dog-eared, well-loved paperback. I didn't need to read the title to know it. The Price of Salt. My vision swam. This wasn't a Bible. It was a manifesto. A rebellion. The pastor's daughter, the symbol of purity and devotion, was hiding a lesbian pulp novel in the gutted heart of her father's word. And she had just handed it to me. The world I knew, built on a foundation of certainties and quiet submission, crumbled into dust at my feet. Underscore 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 after that. The town itself became a different landscape, viewed through a lens of terrifying, exhilarating possibility. Leah was no longer just a figure in a modest dress, folding bulletins with unnerving precision. She was a code I was desperate to crack, a complex melody humming just beneath the surface of a hymn. I, Alara, the carpenter's quiet daughter, who preferred the honest company of wood and wheat fields to the complicated chatter of people, found myself inventing reasons to be near the church. A loose shingle on the roof, a stuck window in the fellowship hall, any pretext was enough. My father, a man of few words himself, was happy to send me, trusting my competence and my silence. He never knew he was dispatching me into a silent war waged with glances and stolen touches. Our interactions were a language without words, a delicate choreography performed in the empty spaces of her father's domain. I'd be high on a ladder, checking the wiring for the steeple light, and feel the ladder shift minutely with a new weight. Looking down, I'd find her studying it, her head tilted back, her gaze a physical touch that warmed my skin even in the chill air. She never looked away first. In the church library, a room that smelled of dust and decaying paper, she would brush past me, the rough cotton of her skirt whispering against my denim-clad legs. Once, her hand, cool and sure, slipped into the open pocket of my tool belt, not taking anything, but leaving something, a smooth, gray river stone, still damp from the creek. I closed my fingers around it, its weight a secret anchor in my day. The notes began to appear. Not signed, not needing to be. A line from Auden, if I could tell you I would let you know, scribbled on a scrap of paper tucked into the band of my saw. A pressed violet, its purple hue faded to a memory, left on the driver's seat of my truck. She was building a bridge between us, stone by stone, word by word, and with every step she took, I felt my own resistance, my own fear, crumbling. I was a person of solid, tangible things, a well-jointed frame, a smoothly planed board. She was introducing me to the architecture of the intangible, the blueprint of desire. The first kiss was born of a summer storm. The sky had turned a bruised purple, and the wind whipped the oak trees into a frenzy. I was caught on the far side of the lake, seeking shelter in the old boathouse, a place I knew well. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and impending rain. The door creaked open, and she slipped inside, a specter of damp cotton and wild hair. Water droplets clung to her eyelashes like tiny diamonds. She didn't speak, just stood there, her chest rising and falling rapidly, her gaze fixed on me as if I were the only solid thing in a spinning world. The first crack of thunder shook the old building, and she flinched. In 2 strides, I was before her. I didn't think. I reached out, my hand cupping her cheek, my thumb stroking away a drop of rain that traced a path down her temple. Her eyes fluttered closed, and she leaned into my touch, a small, desperate sound escaping her lips. That was all the invitation I needed. I bent my head, and my lips found hers. It was not a kiss of conquest, but of discovery. Her lips were soft, cooler than I'd imagined, and tasted of the storm and something sweet, like the strawberries we'd picked at the church social the week before. It was hesitant, a question asked in the dark. My hands moved to her waist, anchoring her, anchoring me. When she responded, her mouth opening slightly under mine, it was like the sun breaking through the clouds. It was a slow, deep, melting together that sent warmth flooding through my veins, pooling low in my stomach. It was the first key turning in a lock I hadn't known existed within me. When we finally broke apart, breathless, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one she had unleashed inside my soul. Underscore 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 underscore. Our world became the golden hour, the space between daylight and dusk, the hidden corners where the steeple's shadow couldn't reach. The boathouse was our sanctuary, our confessional. It smelled of old cedar, dried lakeweed, and the faint, metallic tang of forgotten fishing tackle. There, surrounded by the gentle lap of water against the pilings, we were not the pastor's daughter and the carpenter's daughter. We were just Leah and Alara. We built a nest of old horse blankets and moth-eaten cushions in a dry corner, a fortress against the world. It was there she began to whisper her truths to me, her voice a soft murmur against the skin of my neck as we lay tangled together. She spoke of the crushing weight of her father's expectations, the loneliness of being a symbol, a perfect example, rather than a person with flaws and desires. She confessed how she felt like a ghost in her own life, performing a role written for her before she could talk. I, in turn, told her about the hollow ache my mother's death had left in her home, about my father's quiet, enduring grief, and my own feeling of being out of step with the girls my age, whose dreams involved weddings and babies, not the grain of a piece of oak or the satisfaction of a perfectly level floor. Our physical intimacy was a slow, burning exploration, a cartography of trust. We graduated from kisses to the profound vulnerability of bare skin. I remember the first time I unbuttoned her blouse, my fingers fumbling, my heart a wild drum in my ears. She watched me, her eyes dark and unblinking, as I pushed the fabric from her shoulders. The afternoon light filtered through the dusty window, gilding her skin. She was more beautiful than any stained glass angel, real and trembling and mine. My hands learned the geography of her, the elegant line of her collarbone, the soft swell of her breasts, the delicate curve of her spine. One afternoon, her hand slid under the hem of my t-shirt, her palm flat and warm against the small of my back. Her touch was electric. "Right there," she whispered, her voice husky with a need that mirrored my own. She guided my hand, showing me the pressure, the rhythm she craved. It was in those moments that I felt her walls, the ones she presented to the world, truly crumble. She unraveled before me, and in doing so, she pulled the threads of my own defenses until I was laid bare, vulnerable, and more alive than I had ever been. We learned each other's bodies like a familiar language, moving together in a slow, worshipful rhythm that had nothing to do with sin and everything to do with sanctity. We syncopated our breathing, our heartbeats, our pleasure until we peaked together, a shared, shuddering release that left us breathless and entwined in the quiet aftermath. The only sound our ragged breathing and the gentle knocking of a loose board against the dock outside. Underscore 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 underscore. Just a quick pause. If you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button and stay with us here on Sapphic Tales. The idyll could not last. The turning point was as subtle and insidious as a hairline crack in foundation, almost invisible until the whole structure groaned in protest. It began with looks. Pastor Michael's gaze, which had always been one of benign pastoral approval when it landed on me, now held a new, assessing quality. He started appearing in places I was working, offering a jovial, "How's it coming, Alara?" But his eyes would be scanning the area as if looking for evidence of a crime I hadn't yet committed. The weight of his silent scrutiny was a constant pressure on the back of my neck. The confrontation finally came one evening after a youth group meeting. I had been repairing a door frame in the fellowship hall, and Leah had lingered, pretending to straighten chairs. Our fingers had brushed as we both reached for the same chair back, a spark of lightning in the mundane. We didn't see him standing in the doorway, observing us. He cleared his throat, the sound like a rock slide in the quiet room. "Leah, your mother is waiting in the car," he said, his voice even, but with a chill beneath the surface that made my blood run cold. She jumped, her face flushing a deep, guilty red. "Yes, Father." She scurried away without looking at me. Pastor Michael didn't move. He stood there, a tall, broad-shouldered silhouette against the bright lights of the hallway, his presence filling the room, sucking out all the air. "Alara," he began, taking a few steps into the room. He picked up a nail I had dropped, rolling it between his finger and thumb. "You're a good girl. From a good family. I've always thought of you as a steady, sensible young woman." He paused, letting the compliment hang, a shiny bait over a hidden trap. "Leah, she is different. She has a tender heart, a spirit that needs protecting from worldly influences." He looked directly at me then, and his eyes were no longer those of a kindly pastor, but of a father, a possessive, fearful man. "I think it would be best for everyone if you limited your time here. We can manage the smaller repairs ourselves. We wouldn't want anyone to get the wrong idea, would we? To see a friendship and mistake it for something unwholesome." The word was a carefully chosen blade, sharp and clean. It wasn't an accusation, but a warning, a threat. He was drawing a line in the sand, and I was firmly on the other side. He dropped the nail. It hit the linoleum floor with a sharp, final ping. Then he turned and walked out, leaving me standing in the middle of the room, feeling naked, judged, and filled with a cold, simmering rage. Underscore 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 the poison of his warning seeped into everything, tainting our golden hours with a gray fear. Our meetings in the boathouse became fraught, our heads constantly cocked for the sound of an approaching footstep, an unwelcome voice. We were like two deer, frozen at the slightest crack of a twig. Leah grew thin, the shadows under her eyes deepening into bruises. The light-hearted joy that had characterized our early time together was replaced by a desperate, clinging intensity. Our kisses tasted of salt tears as often as they did of spearmint. The hollowed-out Bible, once a symbol of our delicious secret, now felt like a lead weight, a testament to the duplicity that was slowly crushing us. One night, a fierce autumn storm lashed at the town, the wind howling like a banshee around the eaves of my house. A frantic, tapping sound at my window made my heart leap into my throat. I pulled back the curtain to find her there, soaked to the bone, her hair a dark, dripping mess around her pale, terrified face. She was shivering so violently her teeth were chattering. I rustled the window open and hauled her inside, her body icy against mine. She collapsed into my arms, her sobs finally breaking free, great, racking shudders that seemed to tear through her very frame. I peeled the wet clothes from her skin, my hands trembling, and wrapped her in my thickest wool blanket before guiding her to my bed. We lay down together, and I held her as the storm raged outside, a mirror to the tempest in our hearts. This was our first night truly spent together, but it was devoid of passion, filled only with a profound, aching sorrow. She whispered into the darkness, her voice a broken thing. "He's made an appointment for me, with a counselor, at a clinic in the city. He says it's for anxiety, but he gave me pamphlets about purification, about finding God's path for marriage." The words were a death sentence. I held her tighter, as if my arms alone could prevent this future from swallowing her whole. We lay entwined all night, not as lovers, but as fellow prisoners, finding a sliver of comfort in the shared warmth of our bodies, in the synchronized rhythm of our grief. It was the most intimate and devastating night of my life. Underscore 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 the crisis point, when it came, was both inevitable and shocking in its violence. It was a cold, clear Sunday evening, the kind where the stars look like chips of ice in the vast black velvet of the sky. I had dropped off some repaired chairs at the church and saw Pastor Michael's car was gone. A reckless, aching need pulled me towards the boathouse. I needed to be in our space, to breathe air that still held her scent. I was sitting on our nest of blankets, staring at the moon's reflection on the black water, when the door creaked open. It was Leah, her face a mask of stark terror. "He knows," she choked out, her voice raw. "He found the book. The real one. Not the shell, but the book inside." He confronted me. She was trembling, her hands clutching her stomach as if she'd been punched. He called it filth. He called me corrupted. She stumbled towards me, and I caught her, holding her up as her legs gave way. We sank to the floor together, clinging to each other. Our kisses were desperate, frantic, a last, futile attempt to brand each other's souls before we were torn apart. It was a goodbye. I could taste it. I walked her back to the parsonage, my arm tight around her shoulders, both of us silent and numb. As we reached the back steps, the kitchen door flew open, flooding the steps with yellow light. Pastor Michael stood there, his face contorted with a rage so pure it was almost biblical. He looked from my protective hold on his daughter to our tear-streaked faces, and his expression hardened into something unforgiving. He moved with a speed that belied his size, his hand closing around Leah's upper arm like a vice, yanking her away from me. She cried out a short, sharp sound of pain and fear. "Get in the house," he snarled at her, his voice low and guttural. He then turned his fury on me. I warned you. You viper. You have filled her head with your poison. This ends tonight. You will never see her again. If it kept you hooked, subscribe now to Sapphic Tales so you never miss the next." The words were a physical blow, but seeing his hand on her, seeing the pain in her eyes, ignited a fury in me that dwarfed my fear. "Get your hands off her," I shouted, the sound ripping from my throat, raw and primal. He shoved Leah towards the door and took a step towards me, his finger jabbing the air. "She is my daughter. You have no claim here. This abomination is over." The word abomination hung between us, ugly and final. It was the word he used for the worst sins, the ones that warranted hellfire. And he was using it for the way I loved his daughter, for the way she loved me. But then a miracle happened. Leah, who had been cowed and trembling, suddenly straightened her spine. She stepped away from the door, back into the space between her father and me. Her face, though pale and streaked with tears, was set with a terrifying determination. She looked not at me, but at him. "No," she said, her voice quiet but clear, cutting through the tension like a knife. "It is not an abomination. It is love, and it is my choice." She turned her head, and her eyes, full of a stormy, unshakable love, found mine. "I choose her." The silence that fell was absolute. Pastor Michael stared at her, his jaw slack, his face a canvas of disbelief, fury, and a dawning, horrifying understanding. The foundation of his world, built on his authority and her obedience, had just crumbled to dust. He had no weapon against this. No scripture, no threat, could counter the quiet certainty in her voice. He looked from her to me, his eyes empty of everything but a hollow defeat. Without another word, he turned and walked into the house, slamming the door shut, the sound of final, brutal period at the end of his chapter in our story. We were left standing in the cold, the echo of the slam fading into the night. We were free, and the terrifying, vast expanse of that freedom stretched out before us. Underscore 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 underscore. We left that night. There were no lengthy goodbyes, no complex plans. We operated on a shared, desperate instinct. We went to my house. I packed a bag with clothes, my savings from a coffee can in the workshop, my mother's locket, and the hollowed-out Bible. Leah had nothing but the clothes on her back and our dog-eared copy of The Price of Salt. We wrote notes. Mine to my father was a clumsy, inadequate scrawl, an attempt to explain the inexplicable, to beg for an understanding I knew might never come. Hers to her father was just 3 words, written on a piece of my notebook paper. I choose love. We got into my old, battered truck. I turned the key, the engine coughing to life. As we pulled away, the first hint of dawn was a thin, gray line on the horizon. I didn't look back at my sleeping house or at the steeple of the church, a dark finger pointing towards a heaven that had no room for us. We drove towards the unknown, the 2 of us and our fragile, defiant love. The world beyond our town was a vast, intimidating creature. The first year was a blur of struggle. Cheap motels that smelled of mildew and despair, endless highways, the exhausting search for cash-paying work in strange towns. We fought. We cried from fear and hunger and the sheer weight of our isolation. We held each other through nights so dark it felt like the sun would never rise again. The thread that bound us, woven in secret and tempered in fire, was strained to its limit, but it never snapped. Now, we live in a small city apartment with windows that look out onto a bustling street, not a silent steeple. Our love is no longer a hidden thing. It exists in the open, in the simple, daily rhythm of our shared life. It's in the gentle bickering over who used the last of the milk, in the shared quiet over morning coffee, in the comfortable silence as we read on opposite ends of the same sofa, our legs tangled together. Our bed is our own, a place of safety, of passion, of whispered conversations in the dark where we share our new fears and our burgeoning hopes. Sometimes, I still catch her looking at me with a wonder that steals my breath. Just the other evening, she was standing by our window, watching the city lights begin to twinkle in the twilight. She was holding the hollowed-out Bible, running her fingers over its false cover. She turned and smiled at me, a real, deep, unburdened smile that reached all the way to her stormy eyes, erasing the last traces of the haunted girl I'd met in the church. She came to me, and her kiss was a slow, deep, familiar language, a conversation that needed no words. It was a kiss of homecoming, of survival, of a future we were building for ourselves day by day. We had lost a world, but we had built a new one, brick by fragile brick, with our own hands and hearts. It was a hidden love story that had finally, courageously, written its own ending in the light. Quick reminder, if you're enjoying this story, hit subscribe to Sapphic Tales so you don't miss the next one.